Let me hit you with something wild. That warm, soothing cup of tea you might be holding right now could be hiding billions of microscopic plastic particles, outlawed pesticides banned in over 140 countries, and chemicals tied to cancer, hormone disruption, and fertility problems. Sounds dramatic, right? I thought so too, until I started digging. A few months ago, I went on a small personal mission. I wanted to know which teas in the United States were actually clean, safe, and worth drinking every day. What I found had me staring at my mug like it was a crime scene. Some of the brands I trusted the most were quietly blending old leaves, ground-up factory remnants, synthetic, natural scents, and foliage grown with chemicals that farmers in many countries are legally forbidden to use. And the worst part? Many of these companies slap words like pure, natural, or wellness right on the front of the box. So here is my promise. Over the next 15 minutes, I am going to walk you through 7 tea brands that are fooling millions of people with low-quality ingredients, sneaky additives, and marketing tricks designed to make you feel safe while they cut corners. By the time we finish, you will know exactly which teas to avoid for good, and why your innocent daily ritual might be quietly exposing you to things your body definitely does not want. All right, deep breath. Let's begin. Let's kick this off with a brand you probably recognize instantly. That cozy little box with the drowsy bear on the front, the big 100% natural slogan, the bedtime favorite parents love to give their kids. Sounds comforting, until you hear what shattered that warm, wholesome image. Back in 2013, a major class action lawsuit revealed something shocking. Third-party labs tested Celestial Seasonings teas and found that 91% of them carried pesticide residues above federal limits. Not borderline, not questionable, above the legal caps. And the most disturbing part? Their children's sleepy time blend showed 0.26 parts per million of propylchlor, a chemical California's Prop 65 lists as a known cancer agent. Some of their wellness blends even contained propergite, a developmental toxin that has absolutely no business being in anything labeled healthy. How did the company respond? They did not directly deny the findings. Instead, they took their teas to another lab, brewed the samples with extra water, and proudly announced that nothing was detected. Of course, nothing showed up. They basically diluted the toxins until the results looked clean. That's not transparency. That's strategy. And let's not forget, the FDA had already warned them before about quality control issues. Here is the painful truth. Shoppers paying extra for natural were basically volunteering in an unannounced chemistry experiment. Let me ask you this. Have you ever served that bedtime cup to your kids thinking it was pure and gentle? You might want to check that box again. Now, if this one is bad, surely the world's top seller must be better, right? Hold that thought. Now let's shift to the bright yellow box that practically every household has tucked somewhere in a cabinet. Lipton, the #1 selling tea brand on the entire planet. The one grandparents drink daily, the one used in summer iced tea pitchers, the one people trust without a second thought. But here is the twist. That trust is exactly what makes this next part sting. In 2012, Greenpeace ran independent tests on Lipton teas. Every single sample they checked showed contamination. Not 1 or 2 pesticides, but anywhere from 3 to 17. And several of those chemicals are banned in the United States, banned in Europe, and even banned in China. When China outlaws something and it still ends up in your tea, that should raise eyebrows. And we have to talk about those fancy pyramid bags Lipton loves to advertise. They are plastic. When you steep them in hot water, they can release an estimated 11.6 billion microplastic particles and around 3.1 billion nanoplastic particles into one single cup. Those particles have been found in human blood, brain tissue, lungs, and even fetal placentas. That is not a harmless sprinkle. Lipton also uses tea dust and tea powder, basically the leftovers, boosted with lab-made flavors to make it smell fresh. Meanwhile, workers on some of their supplying farms have reported unsafe conditions with little oversight. And let's be honest, Unilever is a mega corporation with massive resources. They could do better. They simply chose not to. So let me ask you, do you have a box of Lipton sitting in your kitchen right now? Drop a comment. Because if the biggest brand on earth is this unreliable, the so-called premium labels must be cleaner. Or so you'd think. Let's rethink that. Alright, now let's move from the everyday brands to the fancy stuff. You know the look. Elegant glass jars, colorful loose-leaf mixes, exotic ingredients with names that sound like they came straight out of a wellness retreat. Teavana. The brand health influencers used to rave about. The brand Starbucks bought for a massive $620 million because it looked like the future of premium tea. But behind that polished image, a very different story. When independent labs tested Teavana teas, 100% of the samples came back positive for pesticides. Every single one. And one blend carried 23 different pesticides in a single scoop. Even worse, 77% of their teas failed European Union import rules, which are much stricter than ours. But here is the real gut punch. 62% of the samples contained endosulfan, a chemical banned in 144 countries because it can damage fertility and harm developing babies. This is not some mild contaminant. This is a globally outlawed toxin. And Starbucks? It is hard to imagine they had no idea. Yet Teavana stores kept selling until Starbucks shut down 379 locations in 2017. But even after the closures, Teavana branded teas continued to appear in Starbucks cafes and on store shelves. No major updates in 2024 or 2025 have cleared the old stains from their record. Here's the part that hits home. People paid premium prices believing they were buying cleaner, better tea. Expectant moms, wellness lovers, people trying to avoid chemicals, they ended up sipping a toxic cocktail instead. Have you ordered a tea at Starbucks lately? You might want to ask what is really inside that cup. Because if luxury can hide this much, wait until you hear about the family brand next. Now let's talk about a brand that feels almost patriotic. Bigelow. The three-generation American family company your parents and grandparents probably trusted without hesitation. That friendly box on the shelf, the little story about family tradition, the US flag imagery, it all feels safe. But that feeling is exactly what makes this next part uncomfortable. In 2017, independent lab tests revealed glyphosate, the main chemical in Roundup, inside Bigelow's classic green tea. And not trace curiosity levels, enough to raise real questions. Glyphosate is currently tied to multiple cancer lawsuits, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies it as a probable human carcinogen. How did Bigelow respond? Their CEO brushed off the findings, claiming the results were baseless, and insisting that once you brew the tea, the glyphosate becomes so diluted it essentially does not matter. That logic is like saying, if you water down poison, it magically becomes safe. It does not work that way. And what many people do not know is that Bigelow often sources tea from overseas farms, despite the US branding. Some batches sit in warehouses long enough to taste flat, dusty, or oddly bitter. That quick, harsh color you see the moment the bag hits the water? Often a sign of low-grade tea dust, not whole leaves. Here is the truth. 63% of shoppers think natural means pesticide-free. Bigelow leans on that trust, hard. If you keep their boxes at home because the brand feels family, hit subscribe so you do not fall for that illusion again. Because if even the family labels hide things, then the organic brands must be safe, right? Not exactly. Alright, now let's shift to a brand that feels peaceful, spiritual, and almost therapeutic. Yogi Tea. The box with the warm colors, the little inspirational quotes on every tag, the whole mindful living vibe. This is the tea people buy when they want to feel healthy, balanced, and clean. But here is the twist that nobody expects from a brand wrapped in positivity. In May of 2024, the FDA issued a nationwide recall on nearly 900,000 bags of Yogi's Echinacea Immune Tea because it tested positive for pesticides, even though the product was certified organic. Let that sink in for a moment. An immunity booster, marketed to help your body fight off illness, was pulled from shelves because it contained chemicals that should not be in any organic product. How does that even happen? Complex supply chains, poor oversight, and pesticide drift from nearby farms can corrupt otherwise organic fields. But that does not excuse the fact that the USDA organic seal, at least in this case, failed to protect consumers. It shows that organic is not always the safety shield people assume it is. And there is irony here that hits hard. People with weakened immune systems, the exact folks who turn to echinacea, may have unknowingly made their situations worse. Parents who bought yogi because it seemed gentler and purer, they got the opposite. Even though yogi has since brought in new suppliers and improved its sourcing, the trust they broke in 2024 and 2025 still lingers. So be honest, got a yogi box sitting in your pantry right now? The quotes are uplifting, but the contents might not be. If organics can fail this badly, what about the everyday budget brands? Let's talk about that. Now let's move to a brand so ordinary, so common, that most people barely even notice it anymore. Tetley, the classic blue box, the nothing fancy, just tea choice. And that quiet, everyday image is exactly what makes the next part so unsettling. Back in 2014, lab tests from CBC Marketplace revealed that Tetley tea bags contained residues from 22 different pesticides. Not 2, not 10, 22. And among them were chemicals like monocrotophos and DDT, both long banned because of their extreme toxicity. These are not substances you want within miles of your cup, let alone dissolving into boiling water. And here is the loophole Tetley benefits from. Regulations typically measure single chemicals in isolation, but they do not evaluate the effects of multiple pesticides combined. So a tea bag might technically pass, even while carrying a cocktail of compounds that scientists still do not fully understand when mixed together. Someone who drinks 3 cups a day, every day, could be exposed to 66 total pesticide hits in 24 hours without even realizing it. Tetley has talked about shifting toward biopesticides and improving their supply chain, and there have been small steps reported in 2024. But those older tests still matter, especially when the brand rarely discloses clear sourcing or updated independent results. And for families trying to stretch every dollar, Tetley feels like a harmless bargain, but cheap tea often hides the highest cost, long-term exposure to chemicals that never appear on the label. So tell me, is Tetley part of your daily routine? Because if it is, you might be running a private chemical trial without knowing it. And if budget brands have issues, then surely the premium teas deliver, right? Not quite. Let's talk about that. And now we wrap up the list with a brand that feels classy, refined, even royal. Twinings. The 300-year legacy, the elegant packaging, the proud title of tea supplier to the British monarchy. When people buy Twinings, they think they are stepping into tradition, quality, and purity. But here is the part that cracks that royal illusion. Independent tests found that Twinings teas contain more than 30 different pesticides, one of the highest counts of all major brands. 30, and not mild ones. We are talking about cypermethrin, a nerve-attacking insecticide, chlorpyrifos, linked to developmental delays in children, and emamectin, a compound known for killing pollinators like bees. These should not be floating around in anyone's breakfast brew. Twinings also sources from many of the same massive industrial farms used by cheaper brands. That premium flavor? Often boosted with added scents because some batches sit long enough to go stale. And their traditional paper tea bags? Some have been treated with chlorine-based whitening processes, which can leave behind trace residues that certainly do not belong in your cup. There have not been major fresh scandals in 2024, but the long-standing concerns never vanished. Loyal customers kept paying double, believing the history and royal reputation meant higher standards. But the truth is, a classy heritage does not guarantee clean tea, so be honest. Have you paid $7 for a box of Twinings, thinking you were getting something elite? That royal seal might just be a royal ripoff. Now we have unmasked all 7 brands. But don't worry, this is not about giving up tea. It is about drinking smarter. Ready for the final takeaway? Let's bring it home. So let's bring everything together. You have now seen the 7 tea brands millions of people trust, and the ugly truths hiding behind their labels. Celestial seasonings with cancer-linked chemicals in kids' blends. Lipton with plastic particles flooding every cup. Tivana with banned toxins found in every single sample. Bigelow with glyphosate traces tied to cancer lawsuits. Yogi tea with its massive organic recall. Tetley with a chemical cocktail of 22 pesticides, and Twinings with over 30 contaminants despite its royal image. These boxes might be sitting in your kitchen right now. Some of them may have been served to your family for years. Not because you made a bad choice, but because these companies count on you never checking what is actually inside your mug. Here is the real message. Tea is not the problem. The problem is the brands that hide behind cozy packaging, wellness words, and premium marketing while cutting corners that affect your health. Once you know the truth, you get the power back. You get to choose teas that are clean, transparent, and genuinely safe. So, before your next cup, take 1 minute. Go to your pantry, look at your boxes, and if any of these 7 brands are sitting there, do not finish them. Toss them. Now, I want to hear from you. Comment the tea brand in your cupboard right now. How many from this list did you find? If this opened your eyes, hit like, subscribe, and turn on alerts. I have more deep dives coming. Grocery exposés, hidden industry tricks, and smarter shopping tips to protect your health and your wallet. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, stay curious, and always read the labels.